Hi there everybody. So I'm trying a new method of video tutorials after receiving some feedback from some of the video watchers that said it might be easier if I just explain code that's written rather than go through the whole rote process of starting from scratch on every project. So since we already have videos that describe how to do Spring Data Mongo and how to do annotations, get and post methods, etc., it only makes sense just to start with an existing project. So this project, in the POM file, we have the org.json imports, as well as the Spring Data MongoDB imports. The topic today is going to be how to make your own annotations similar to request mapping. We're going to make two of them called JSON get mapping, JSON post mapping. And we have here a basic model, which has an ID, model ID, and value, which maps to the document basic model. And we go to application properties is on localhost local. Going to Studio 3T, we see that we have a localhost local basic model collection, which right now as it stands is empty. So now if we go ahead and run this project, then we will see what we have to work with. There are two basic methods here. One of them is going to be using the post mapping, and the other one is going to be using the get mapping. So post JSON consumes a basic model object, and get by ID with the pass variable ID is going to look up on an ID and return that value, or it's going to return no records found. So let's try this out in Postman. If we go into Postman and we actually post in to post JSON, and add in the relevant data here, this JSON application JSON as the value, and hit send, we successfully post with a 200 OK. Going back to Mongo, we find we have the model ID and the value, and we see that Spring Data has mapped this out to being something inside of the file we made, with some object ID as well. So now that we have this working, let us attempt to do a get call. Doing a get call, we see that there is nothing for that because it doesn't know what it's looking for here. Name for argument type not available, parameter type information on the class file either. Let's see what's going on here. Get by ID, ID. If we breakpoint this, oh, it's not running. That would make a bit of a difference, now wouldn't it? It's already running. I'm going to terminate the process by going ahead and doing an ls sub on port 9000. Oh, interesting. There, it's closed and waiting. So let's kill off 75829. And let's kill off 78673. There, now if I do an ls sub, should be empty. Still closed. That makes no sense. But okay. If I rerun, now it should work. And opening Postman, I should be able to see the results of how this works as an illustration for the motivation behind why we're doing our annotations. So now when this starts to run again, and it is, now we can do a get call. I'm going to close that out and do the get call. No records found for that ID. 1F2 ending in 99. Oh, that's why. So I had a different ID that time. I'm going to copy my ID across. I'm going to paste it in here. We do it, now we get a result. Model ID, value, new entry as JSON. So that's just fine. That's what we would expect, as what we are getting back here is not meant to be pretty printed. It is simply just returning the mapper right value as string so we can manipulate it as a string. So now that we've got that out of the way and we've described the post and the get call nature here, let's look at the JSON annotations. When you deal with request mapping, what you're dealing with is a basic annotation type, which is simply an interface which is marked with an @ symbol at the beginning. The @ interface tells this is going to be an annotation. You can add it with an @ symbol and it runs specific data. So there is a few different things to note here. We're adding this in the element type method. We could also put it on the type, constructor, etc. By putting on a method, we tell it this annotation maps to a method type, or it goes to a type, our choice. For the retention policy, we have runtime, we have class, and we have source. What runtime means is allow reflection during runtime. So then we can look back at our class data and manipulate it, add and remove fields on the annotations, etc. Class means maintain it at the class level, but don't allow to do any kind of reflection. And source means that we're going to be dealing with it only at the source level, but then all of the annotation metadata disappears at runtime and is not contained in the class data either, but is just compiled out. So we can see all of this also if we were to go back to the request mapping annotation in IntelliJ. We can see they're using very similar policies. They're also using documented and mapping. Since we're extending the request mapping by using that annotation here, we don't have to add the extra documented mapping annotations. Now, to get into the meat of this, we take the annotation in request mapping.class that's called produces and the annotation called value that are inside of request mapping, and we default those to empty. But at the level of request mapping now, we have added the produces and we have added in the method, but leaving the value alone. So we still have to define value unless we want to leave it empty. If we go back to our main controller, we can replace request mapping now with JSON get mapping. And now it will give us an error because we can't resolve method because I did not write that in there. And so now that we've not written that in there, we cannot overwrite it. It makes it guaranteed to be a get mapping. We also now can eliminate the produces because it's already marked in here that it produces application JSON and application XML, which leaves us a far cleaner annotation to work with and reduces verbosity. The same thing can be done with the JSON post mapping. So now we're getting an error for the post. We're also going to get rid of the consumes and the produces, leaving us just the value annotation, which we did override in the class. If we look at the JSON post mapping, we see we added produces. We also need to go ahead and add in consumes. I have a typo here, but if we add consumes here, then we could override it should we want to. But by default, it'll consume XML or JSON and produce XML or JSON. It will work as a post, and then we can override the value ourselves. And all the other pieces of this are identical. So now if we rerun this program again, and we were to go ahead and try it using these new annotations, what we will find is it should work identical. What we're going to do here is we're going to change the body out to make this a B instead of an A. We're going to change this to another new entry in the database, which is successfully posted. If we go to Mongo, we can verify it was added. And then if we go back to our get call again, we change this to a B, and we hit send, we get a result and we get value with the model ID and the value. Now you might be asking yourself at this point, what about the ID? There is an ID. It's an object ID. We're ignoring it using the JSON ignore annotation. This is a very convenient way to do things using Jackson, as well as to ignore non-null values. So we can even take our database right now and make this a null value in here. So let's get rid of value and see what happens. Or let's get rid of model ID. Now if we go and we hit this again, no records found. That's not exactly what I was expecting, but actually it is what I was expecting, because I just removed the model ID. So that's why I was going to remove the value. So I'll just go to the other one and remove the value. So remove the model ID, there's nothing to look up on. But if we remove the value on the letter A, now we just get the model ID but no value, because we're ignoring the nulls and because we're ignoring the ID. Now what happened if we were to get rid of the JSON ignore here, and if we were to get rid of this non-null right here and recompile? Well, I can tell you right now it's going to show you ID null, or ID, the Mongo ID metadata, value is null, and then the model ID, which is kind of a tacky experience that you really don't want. As you can see here, you've got that tacky data now about the Mongo ID, but you've also got value null. So this is a very handy thing for production enterprise APIs when you need to decipher whether you want to show something or not. You can ignore it altogether, or you can only ignore it if it's non-null. So I hope that gives you an idea of how you can do things with annotations. The GitHub link is in the description on YouTube, so please visit that and clone it and play with this yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.